horrible incident occurred while 6 men were investigating the 300 feet deep Cascade Cave on Vancouver Island. This is their story. Jason Storie, a novice caver from Vancouver, Canada, headed out with 5 friends on a trip to Cascade Cave on December 5, 2015. When he kissed his wife goodbye that morning, he never imagined he'd never see her again. Jason is new to caving. He had only visited 4 other caves prior to their trip to the Cascade. He's 43, a stocky father of 2 toddlers. Andrew Munoz, a former cave guide, introduced him to caving. Andrew is now a paramedic. If something went wrong, he would know what to do. Jason and Andrew drove through the pouring rain to the parking lot of a log cabin near Port Albany at 6 a.m. on December 5th. They were with 2 other pals, Adam Shepard, a paramedic, and Zach Zariski, a cook and volunteer firefighter. The key they acquired after signing a waiver would open the metal door leading into Cascade's little well-hidden entryway. This shows how deadly this cave can be. Cascade is a mile long and 338 feet deep, full of winding curves and exceedingly tight squeezes, a claustrophobe's nightmare, and soon, Jason and Andrew's nightmare. The 4 friends met up with the remaining 2 members of their party, computer programmers Matt Watson and Arthur Taylor. They drove about half a mile on an obscure trail before halting in a clearing to inventory their gear. Ropes, harnesses, carabiners, 2 backpacks containing a small gas-fueled Jetboil stove, food, water, a first aid kit, and a Mylar space blanket resembling aluminum foil. The group was as prepared as one can be for the difficult caving ahead. At 10 a.m., they arrived at the Cascade entrance, which is hidden on the ground and easily missed if you aren't looking for it. They pushed open the metal door and descended a 30-foot aluminum ladder, each anchored to a rope with carabiners. They tied the key to the bottom of the ladder. They moved down a narrow corridor lined with sharp boulders, illuminated by their flashlights. Water drip may be heard in the background. That trickle soon became a gentle but regular flow, a foreshadowing of tragedy. But the group was unaware of it. It was 41 degrees Fahrenheit, rainy and uncomfortable. Adam's back, which had been hurt a few weeks before, began to twinge about 45 minutes in. He informed his friends that he couldn't go any longer. Matt guided him to the door before returning to his waiting pals. They continued to explore for the next 90 minutes, marveling at Mother Nature's rugged landscape and delicate creations. They crawled, marched, and slid through the difficult passages and corridors of the cave. As Andrew once told Jason, everything in sight was erratic. They were soon approaching Bastard's Crawl, one of the cave's distinguishing characteristics. The very narrow passageway, hardly wide enough to stand in, leads to a short, tight downward. Andrew asks his friends to crab walk to get through. Following Bastard's Crawl is a waterfall called Double Trouble, so named because a protruding boulder divides the stream in 2. They set up their ropes to abseil 50 feet. Boots and gloved hands claw for traction on the slick ledges on either side of them. As the group of cavers trekked deeper into the cave, they were oblivious to the gushing water outside. But the heavy rain turned into a storm, and water collected before bursting through subterranean tunnels. The group stopped for a 20-minute lunch past Double Trouble, 3 hours into the cave, before pushing towards their goal a quarter-mile away. They only managed 300 feet before Zach shivered uncontrollably, prompting a retreat. Matt led the way back, followed by Arthur, Jason, Zach, and Andrew. The sound of rushing water grew louder, and the path was muddier. At 2:15, the group approached Double Trouble. The cascade was suddenly rushing down, churning violently into white foam. How could this have happened so quickly? Is it rain runoff? Jason had strayed. Matt tied the rope that had been left attached at the top of the jutting rock to his harness and began hauling himself up. Climbing up was significantly more difficult than rappelling down. It was only 50 feet, but finding leverage in the tiny damp shelves of the rock wall was difficult and precise work. When Matt reached the summit, he He immediately tossed down the rope for the others. Arthur was the next to ascend, followed by Jason. Jason climbed the gradient of Bastard's Crawl on his stomach. The water was deeper this time, and it slammed into his face with surprising force. He plowed ahead. Unfortunately, as he approached the passage's mouth, a tremendous surge of water carried him onto his back. Jason was quickly underwater, and the water pressure was enormous. It was fast approaching behind him. He'd be pushed out onto the sharp rocks below if he didn't get out of the crawl quickly. Jason had been trapped for 5 minutes. He attempted to call for aid, but the rushing water made it difficult for him to breathe. He was panting for breath. Zach, who was trailing Jason, spotted his plight. He promptly contacted Andrew for assistance. Andrew acted quickly. He scurried to the bottom of the crawl and peered up at Jason, who was in a perilous position despite being only a few feet away. He instructed Jason to float up by stepping on his shoulders, but Jason's foot became stuck between rocks, ultimately trapping him in the tiny opening. Andrew fished about in the rushing water to extricate Jason's foot. Jason finally emerged from Bastard's Crawl 20 minutes later. He was fatigued, his eyes were closed tight, and he was gasping. The ordeal, however, did not end there. As the water continued to rise, Andrew covered his pal in a mylar blanket and heated up the jet boil. He asked Zach to join Arthur and Matt beyond Bastard's Crawl and to notify search and rescue if he and Jason didn't catch up within 30 minutes. They were not able to catch up in 30 minutes. Andrew tried his hardest to warm Jason up. He put hot water on his garments till his color returned to normal. They tried to flee again a few minutes later, but the water kept rising. When they reached the top of the crawl, there was only 4 inches of space between the water and the ceiling, which was insufficient for them to hold their heads up and breathe. Fortunately, Jason saw a ledge large enough for the two of them to perch. 6 p.m. They were 200 feet below the surface, huddled together under a blanket Zach had left them 3 hours before in order to conserve batteries on their headlamps. Because their jet boil had run out of fuel, the two were mostly in the dark. Jason, a university theater graduate, used his theatrical expertise to compel his breathing to slow and go through his diaphragm and up to the tip of his head. He drew his sweatshirt up to his nose to warm his face, thinking of his family and how much life insurance he had. Andrew, for his part, quoted a quote from the science fiction classic Dune. "Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little black death that leads to complete oblivion. I'll let the dread run through me, and when it's gone, only I'll be left." Both guys were terrified for their lives and the lives of their companions, wondering if they would survive. There was no indication of rescuers as the water outside the cave continued to rise. Despite Jason and Andrew's fears that their 3 friends had survived and phoned for aid, members of the ground and cave search and rescue squads began to swarm around 9 p.m. However, rescue was impossible at the moment due to the rising water level and severity. The team would have to wait for the water level to drop before attempting to enter the cave again. Jason and Andrew snored intermittently, checking in on each other every 20 minutes to ensure the other was still alive. One of them would occasionally switch on their headlights to check the water level. They kept doing this for 12 hours straight. At around 5 a.m., the water began to recede. After an hour, it had dropped low enough for the two to keep their heads above water and attempt to flee. Over the next 90 minutes, the two fought their way to the cave's entrance, muscles throbbing and tired. They waded through chest-high water until they finally reached a tunnel high enough for them to walk erect. They noticed lights flickering in the distance ahead. Jason had only one thought: they were successful. And there we have it, folks. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like and subscribe buttons, as well as the bell icon, to be notified when we post another tragic cave incident.